The Memphis Grizzlies lost their first summer league game, but they signed a free agent to an offer sheet. We got a lot to talk about coming up here right now on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Damichael Cole. Welcome to Locked On Grizzlies. Again, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Odoo. Today's episode is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at Odoo.com slash locked on. That's ODOO.com/locked on. We got a lot to unpack in today's show. We're going to preview a game that's going to happen later today. We're going to talk about a Grizzlies potential free agent signing, offer sheet signing, however you want to word it. But we got to talk about that player and that situation in the second segment. But in the first segment, we're going to recap the second Grizzlies Summer League game, their first loss against the Utah Jazz. Grizzlies Jazz, Memphis lost 109-100. Again, when it comes to Summer League, like I know you, I saw the comments. I got a good laugh out of it. I know there are people that want to see this team kind of win the Summer League championship, and that'll be cool, right? The Grizzlies have a squad that's capable of doing just that. But more than anything, you want to see these guys continue to improve and progress. And I think we saw some layers in this game that we're going to talk about here in this first segment and kind of over the course of Summer League. We saw some layers where, yes, it's a talented group, but there's still some kind of synchronizing, right? There's still some things that have to happen to form cohesiveness within this really talented Summer League group. The first thing we're going to talk about from this game was the Darryn Peterson assignment. So this was billed as the number 2 pick versus the number 3 pick, right? Darryn Peterson, Utah Jazz, went number 2. Cam Boozer went number 3. And Darryn Peterson was the star of the show. There was nothing wrong with the way that Cam Boozer played. We're going to talk about him in a few minutes here. But Darryn Peterson was the star of the show, 25 points, 12 assists in this game. He knocked down some nice three-point shots off the dribble, really controlled the game, played at his pace, 8 of 15 from the field, didn't have a lot of turnovers as well. So he was extremely productive. And one of the more impressive parts of it was the Grizzlies threw bodies at him. Olivier Maxence Prosper got the assignment. Cedric Coward took on the assignment. Javon Small, Jemai Mashak. Jemai Mashak, I think, in much smaller sample size, he did solid. It would have been cool now looking back on it to see Jemai Mashak kind of start against him and see what that would have looked like. But again, we're going to talk about Jemai Mashak later in the show as well. But Darryn Peterson was a tough assignment, and his creativity really stood out as a scorer, as a playmaker. And, you just wonder. Like, yes, I believe in these guys, Olivier Maxence Prosper as a defender, Cedric Coward as a defender, Javon Small. But was it more so, hey, look, Darryn Peterson's just that good? Or are those defenders, quote unquote, good defenders, not the great type, right? I call them ace defenders. I know we talked a lot this offseason about, I call players who are your top players 1As, right? From a defensive standpoint, I think most teams, you want to win a championship, you need an ace-level defender. There's a lot of B-level defenders out here who are really good. They can guard some of the top guys, but some nights the top guys are going to get them. Some nights they're going to get top guys. The ace guys, the top guys are running from them. When they see Drew Holiday guarding them, for the most part, unless you're Jimmy Butler. But most guys, Damian Lillard in the past, Devin Booker, those dudes, when they see Drew Holiday guard them, they say, hey, screen, come give me a screen. When certain players see OG Anunoby, see Scotty Barnes, like when LeBron James used to see Kawhi Leonard, Andre Iguodala, you say, hey, come give me a screen. Come give me a screen. Let me get a more favorable matchup. Those are the ace-level defenders. And look, Darryn Peterson was playing out of pick and roll, all that good stuff in this game. But I'm curious now. That is something I'm going to keep my eye on. I believe in Jemai Mashak from that standpoint, but Cedric Coward's going to be a starter. He's going to be a guy with this 7'2" wingspan. I think best case scenario, you want him to be that ace level type defender. But Olivier Maxence Prosper again got the first draw with Darryn Peterson. We saw Cedric Howard got Cody Williams, who's probably the second most talented player who started for Utah in that game. He got he pickpocketed a couple times. I believe Cedric Howard had 3 blocks as well. So, look, the playmaking is there with Cedric Howard as a defensive playmaker. So I'm not worried about, again, usually B-level defenders can do that. They can make plays defensively and things like that. But to me, it's about, can he become that stopper? And that's something I'm going to keep my eye on as he continues to play the rest of the summer league. Now we got to talk about Cam Boozer, right? We talked about this standpoint of this was a matchup build, number 2 pick versus number 3 pick. And Cam Boozer, you look at the end of the first half, and it was like 5 points. I think it was 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and he only took 2 shots. And it's like I noticed it, but then seeing it was different. And here's the thing. Utah was a bigger team, right? Bigger than OKC. We talked about that going into the game when we previewed it on the last show. The thing about OKC, if you wanted to be a critic, if you wanted to nitpick that Cam Boozer performance, because, again, there's no such thing as a perfect player. There's always something you can dissect in a guy's game to get better. And I talked about it with OKC. They were a little bit smaller, right? And we saw a lot of times in college, Cam Boozer, when he was playing against those smaller guys, he was at the 4, drew those double teams, or when they didn't double, he had easy finishes, by his standards, easy finishes around the rim. But Utah had some bigger bodies they threw at him and whatnot, so it made it a little bit more challenging. But guess what? He adjusted. First half, it was the playmaking, and then I think he saw the stat sheet at halftime, said, "What? I only got 2 shots." Took 7 shots in the second half, finished the game 18 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, got a steal in there. Real active hands, too. I think that's something we've talked about with Cam Boozer for a while. But, again, we saw it in this game. There was one play where he knocked the ball out of bounds. I think it was first play of the second half off the center on the inbounds play or the power forward. There was another play. Darryn Peterson had him isoed one-on-one, thought he was about to get have Cam Boozer tap dancing out there, but Cam Boozer knocked the ball away with some active hands when Darryn Peterson tried to get downhill. So he has active hands defensively, and that's kind of going to be his calling card, right? He's not going to be this big-time shot blocker, but he has active hands, and he's going to catch, guys like that, sort of like a Ty Jerome in a way, who is another guy who has very active hands but may not be the most, noted defender from a physical attribute standpoint. But with all that being said, it was good to see Cam Boozer show another facet, right? We saw in the first game, made 1 3-pointer, did most of his work inside of the arc. This game, a lot of his work came from beyond the 3-point line. Again, 18 points, 4 3-pointers, not just 4 3-pointers, 4 of 5 from 3-point range. So, again, against a bigger front court, bigger front line, he was 1 of 3 on 2 of 4 on 2-pointers in this game because he shot 6 of 9 overall. But the thing is, he adjusted, still was able to get 4 assists, could have had more. He got 7 boards, knocked down 4 3-pointers, and the 3-point shot looks really good for him. He looks extremely comfortable shooting out there to 3-point range, the NBA range. So another good, encouraging performance from Cam Boozer. Like, you see the type of impact this guy can have. The only complaint I have is he probably didn't get the ball enough. The fact that he took 2 shots in the first half, that shouldn't happen. Cam Boozer shouldn't be taking 2 shots. But we know why it happened. It happened because Cedric Howard said, "I'm going to be aggressive in this game." All these people talk about, can Cedric Howard be aggressive and all that? And he said, "Okay, I'll do just that." Last game, Cedric Howard took 13 shots. That's a good number. That's pretty much a Cedric Howard number. This game, 12 shots in the first half alone. Almost matched his previous game total. In the first half alone, for the game, 21 shot attempts, 9 of 21 from the field, 3 of 12 from 3-point range. So, again, he continues. When he gets inside the 3-point line, he's always been an efficient player. Same thing for this game, 6 of 9 on 2s. But overall, 9 of 21 shooting from the field. We talked about the 3 blocks, 23 points to lead the Grizzlies. I thought it was a solid performance. 12 3-pointers. He's probably not going to shoot 12 3-pointers in the game many times. But I like the aggressiveness. I like the idea of, let me go out here and get these shots up confidently. But now you kind of have sort of like a building block from the standpoint of, you want Cedric Howard to be more aggressive, but you also want to make sure Cam Boozer gets all his touches and then some, because you know how good Cam Boozer is. He's got to get his touches, but you can't forget about Cedric Howard, right? Cedric Howard's got to, he's probably going to be a good number 3 option, solid number 2 option, whatever. We'll see kind of how his career progresses. But He's got to get his too. And in this game, we saw Cedric Howard get his touches, and then there was certain stretches where it felt like Cam Boozer didn't get as many. But that's what Summer League's for. That's why I said, yeah, they got guys on this team that are quote unquote too good for Summer League. Cedric Howard doesn't need to play in these games after he's played a couple. That's all we need to see. Cam Boozer really doesn't have to play in these games, but from a continuity standpoint, from a building this team standpoint, from a parity standpoint, to realize, hey, this is what we have. This is how these guys mesh, or just get an idea like, these players aren't playing well together. Let's build out a plan through August, through September, so we get to preseason camp. We have something to emphasize with them on the floor together. So that's what this time is about to me. That's how I look at it, as well as the individual progression of these players. So again, Grizzlies lose 109 to 100. Who cares really about the overall result? It's about the progress. It wasn't just those guys. The rest of the starters who played solid basketball. Olivier Maxence prospered 16 points. Javon Small, 14 points, 6 assists, a couple made three-pointers. Carson Cooper stepped in as the starter. Taylor Hendricks was out. He had 10 points himself. Didn't really get a lot of scoring, from the bench unit. So that's kind of how that first Grizzlies game mapped out. But now with that game done, we have a potential Grizzlies sign. The Grizzlies have signed they have signed Quinten Post to an offer sheet. We're going to talk about what that means, what that looks like, and more coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get into that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by the one and only Odoo. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another app for inventory, and another for sales. And somehow, none of them talk to each other, and that's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on the growing business instead of managing software. It's really simple. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working toward the same goal, and that's true in sports just like it is in business. There's so many examples that come to mind for me. The most recent example with the Grizzlies is having the number 16 pick, moving back to 17. That was a decision that the Grizzlies front office made as a whole, moving back to 21 and still getting a player that you valued at 16 in Kareem Lopez while adding Isaiah Stewart and a couple second-round picks in addition to that. So that's how you kind of move around and work together as a team. And guess what? Great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at Odoo.com / locked on. That's ODOO.com / locked on. Welcome back here to Locked On Grizzlies. And we got a free agent signing. The Memphis Grizzlies had all these moves, all these trades, and all these moving parts. And we talked about how packed the roster is, and they're going to have to let guys go and all that. They said, okay, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But now we're going to keep adding guys because that's what they did, signing Quinten Post from the Golden State Warriors to an offer sheet. 3 years, $30 million is the deal. He's a restricted free agent, which means in this case, the Golden State Warriors have until the end of tonight, Eastern time, so 11:59 Eastern time, to match the deal. And if Golden State doesn't match it by that time, he will be a Memphis Grizzly. So I've talked to some people. I've kicked the tires on here. Everything that I've heard, every inclination that I've gotten is Quinten Post will be a member of the Memphis Grizzlies. It seems very unlikely. Talking to people with intel, it's very unlikely that Quinten Post, the offer that he got from the Grizzlies, will be matched by Golden State. In particular, Golden State is star hunting over there, right? Draymond Green declined his team option. We've heard about the LeBron James pursuit and things like that. If they were to match the Grizzlies' offer of Quinten Post, it then impacts some of the things that they're trying to do in terms of adding that star power. So is Quinten Post worth that for the Warriors? It doesn't sound like it. So sounds like this guy's going to end up being a member of the Memphis Grizzlies, and there's a lot to unpack there. I think the number one thing we need to start with is his role will be the third center, right? You still got Zach Edey. That's everything health-wise goes well. That is your starting center. Isaiah Stewart is still part of this reported deal. And let's touch on that really quick. And it's going to get a little confusing here because we're going to touch on it. I'm going to try to break it down to the best of my ability. Stick with me because it's a little bit complicated, right? The Grizzlies pretty much can sign. I mean, they can finalize the trade for Isaiah Stewart right now, but there's certain things that the team's trying to work out in order to basically do some cap maneuvering, right, to financially make this work out the best way possible. Now, here's the thing. The Grizzlies had traded Santi Aldama. They traded for Isaiah Stewart. Neither of those deals are finalized. There is the possibility that the Santi Aldama trade for A.J. Johnson and the Isaiah Stewart trade to the Grizzlies all gets looped into one big 3, 4, 5 team deal, and that could be beneficial for the Grizzlies. Here's the situation in a nutshell. We know that the Grizzlies have that $28-29 million traded player exception that they got from the Utah Jazz, right? So in theory, you get Isaiah Stewart in that trade, and you can take him in to that traded player exception that you got from the Utah Jazz in the February trade. Hold up a minute. Wait a minute. The Grizzlies want to keep that traded player exception. They don't want to use that right now. And there is a way that they could keep that traded player exception, not use it on part of it, at least on Isaiah Stewart's $15 million. Because guess what? In this trade for Santi Aldama, right? Well, Santi Aldama going to the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks took Santi Aldama's contract with a $20 million traded player exception that they got in that Anthony Davis to the Washington Wizards deal. So Dallas is taking in Santi Aldama into that deal. Santi has a $17 million contract, which then creates a $17 million traded player exception for the Memphis Grizzlies. So if your brain isn't too caught in the weaves just yet, here's the thing. The Grizzlies have a $29 million traded player exception. They have the potential of gaining a $17 million traded player exception from the Santi Aldama to the Dallas Mavericks deal. If they get that $17 million traded player exception, they can say, wait a minute, let's just keep this $29 million one. Let's hold that. And what we're going to do is we're going to loop in Isaiah Stewart's $15 million contract into that $17 million trade player exception. And no harm, no foul. Now we get to take in Isaiah Stewart with that. And then you still have this big asset, the $29 million traded player exception available pretty much until the next season's trade deadline. So that's kind of the skinny on that situation. That's why we're still seeing, how that's going to work out. If the deals were to happen separately some type of way, I'm sure Santi Aldama and A.J. Johnson is going to happen first because the Grizzlies, in all likelihood, want to put Isaiah Stewart's contract in the Santi Aldama trade player exception. So that's why you haven't seen the official announcement on either of those deals, still working out the details. And, of course, once those details are out, we'll have them here on Locked On Grizzlies and my work at the Commercial Appeal as well on X at Damichael C. So stay tuned for that. But, again, Quinten Post, in that case, you're going to be behind Zach Edey, going to be behind Isaiah Stewart. So he's going to be the third center. I think he's a solid third center. I think he will feel kind of a similar role to what Jock Landale was supposed to play. Right? When the Grizzlies got him, it was this idea of, he's going to be the backup center and he's going to back up, Zach Edey. He's going to back up Brandon Clark and kind of play this role, but it didn't work out that way. And then before that, you had a guy, Jay Huff, right? Come in, knock down some three-pointers, block a couple shots here, Huff stuff, Huff, all that good stuff. And with Quinten Post, you look at this game, the three-point shooting is what jumps out, right? Over both seasons made, over a three-pointer a game. Rookie season, he shot over 40% from three-point range, over 4 attempts, took over 4 attempts again in his second season and shot roughly 34%, 34%. So the percent from the three-point range fell off in his second season. But at the same time, he was still a little bit more efficient inside the arc. So he took a jump on his 2-point percentage inside the arc while his three-point shot fell off a little bit. But the guy can shoot the basketball. Quinten Post can definitely do that. He's hit some shots against the Grizzlies, that's for sure. So I think it's a solid signing. You get another big guy who's like 7 feet. He's going to stretch the floor. He's going to set some screens for you. Not really the best rebounder or shot blocker, but there's ways to overcome that. And I believe this roster, as it's shaping out, this is the type of guy you want to get as your third center. Some people see 3 years, $30 million, and they're scared of that. They're saying, you're giving 3 years, $30 million to a guy who, kind of was in and out of the rotation with Golden State and all that stuff. Well, here's the situation. And according to Jake Fisher, who I'm actually known for a while at this point, but Jake Fisher reported that only the first year of the Grizzlies contract is guaranteed for Quinten Post. So in reality, it's going to be a 1-year deal. He plays well. It's an insurance policy type thing, in my opinion. So if Zach Edey is still dealing with some injuries, so guess what? Okay, you still got Quinten Post, you still got Isaiah Stewart. He also has an option, after the upcoming season as well. So you still keep your flexibility while also putting the pressure on the Warriors to make a deal that they probably do not want to make in matching the offer sheet for Quinten Post. So all signs point to Quinten Post becoming a member of the Memphis Grizzlies. That's kind of the skinny on that situation. Some of that didn't make sense to you guys. Let me know. We got the Everydayer Club. We also got the comment section on YouTube. So let me know what you guys think about the Quinten Post signing, as well as a recap of our first segment as well. But coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we got a preview of upcoming game between the Grizzlies and the Hawks on today. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But before we get to that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Indeed. Support for today's episode comes from Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and locations. So less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed like right now. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's so many reasons why you should take advantage of this opportunity over at Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Look, I've already recommended it to my friends. I say, look, you got your company, you got your job. Go on there because you can recruit, and it takes care of all the work for you. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Again, less time, less stress, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Recapping everything that we've talked about so far on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. The first segment, we talked about the Grizzlies game against the Jazz. It was a fun one. It was a fun matchup between some really talented players. Of course, the star power, the conversation was led by Cam Boozer versus Darryn Peterson. Darryn Peterson won the matchup overall, but Cam Boozer didn't play bad. It's not like he was out there just mowing around. Cam Boozer showed you why he's the top 3 pick as well. But that was the first segment. The Grizzlies also are closing in on their first free agent signing. They signed Quinten Post to an offer sheet. He's a restricted free agent, so the Warriors have until the end of today to match that deal. Now, with all that being said, that leads us to our last segment, which is a preview of an upcoming game between the Grizzlies and the Atlanta Hawks. Now, this is a tricky one. We got to get that part out of the way. This is tricky because both teams will be playing a back-to-back, and if you're familiar with summer league basketball, that means you don't know who in the world is going to play. It could be 3 guys in the starting 5. It could be 1 guy who's been in the starting 5. It could be the entire bench. You just never know. You just never know. So what I'm going to do with what we know is I'm going to play it safe. So we're not going to talk about Javon Small in this segment. We know Walter Clayton Jr. isn't playing. We know Kareem Lopez isn't playing. We're not going to talk about Cedric Howard in this segment. We're not going to talk about Cam Boozer in this segment. No. You know what I'm going to talk about? First and foremost, I'm going to talk about Jamal Mashak. Because I've been telling y'all. Said it yesterday. We were talking about all these different guys that had a really good game. And the segment was starting to run along. I said, look, we'll get to Jamal Mashak later. Now it's time to talk about Jamal Mashak. He's making some considerable improvements to his game, specifically on the offensive end. I like to see him be aggressive, right? And overall, you look at his stat sheet against Utah, you only see a couple points, played 16 minutes, 1 of 4 shooting from the field. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. I think when he was in the game and he guarded Darryn Peterson, there was some havoc created there. But he had 5 rebounds, had a couple assists in this game. And this wasn't the impressive game. The first game from Jamal Mashak, the OKC game, the Grizzlies won 111-74. That was kind of the impressive performance. 12 points, 4 assists in there. He had a steal. He had a couple blocks all over the stat sheet. Knocked down a 3-pointer, 4 of 6 shooting from the field. Jamal Mashak, I think it's very clear what his NBA role could be. And I said I was going to write about this at some point because one of the things I like about Jemai Meshack and my time covering him is he's a real student of the game. He's a real student of the game. I've known this actually since he was in college. He went to my alma mater, he went to Tennessee. But the guy really is very intentional about learning the intricacies of basketball, and he knows a lot of them already. High IQ dude, really high IQ dude. But so many games I've seen him pull Drew Holiday, Chris Dunn, and all these different high-level players to the side after the game and just pick their brains. And I remember we were talking about it one day. It was like, they don't know me, but I know them, and I need some of that knowledge that they have, and that's the mindset you got to have. Because when I think of some of those guys who became these top defenders, role player type guys in the league, I remember Chris Dunn when he came in the league, and he had this star potential and all that, and he had to find his way into the role that he's playing right now. Look at Scoot Henderson. He might end up still being some offensive star one day, but it wasn't until this season he said, look, my defense is my calling card. And he locked in on that side of the ball, and he solidified himself as an NBA player. So I think of things like that in terms of Jemai Meshack. There is a clear calling card for a guy like that in the NBA, and I'm curious to see how the Grizzlies will use him in that situation because, quite frankly, you don't want to be the team because what we see with a lot of these guys who are these strong defenders early in their career, they end up going somewhere else. Another team values them a little bit more, and then boom, they kind of break out. It's like, oh, he was here, and he was playing a little bit, but he was playing here and there, and another team kind of reaps the benefits. But again, Jemai Meshack still on two-way contract, keeping a real close eye on him in this game in particular. Hope he gets to play because if he plays, again, if it's anything how I anticipate it to be, Jemai Meshack will be in the starting lineup. That'll be more minutes. I'm sure he's going to play on the ball. He's going to play off the ball. He doesn't have to worry about playing center anymore. I know that's probably good as well. Another guy that I want to keep an eye on is Carson Cooper. So this is a guy who agreed to a two-way contract with the Grizzlies at center from Michigan State. And we know, again, Jemai Meshack, Javon Small, those are your two-way contract guys. And adding a big made a lot of sense in Carson Cooper. He's an athletic dude. We've seen the Grizzlies try to throw him a couple alley-oops. We've seen him finish a couple alley-oops. In this game against the Jazz, he was solid. He was solid in that game for sure. He came off the bench in his first game. He had 11 points, I think 5 rebounds, 5 of 6 shooting from the field overall in that game. And then his second game, he started, had 10 points, 6 rebounds in this game, 3 of 5 shooting from the field. So clearly he's a guy who's going to have a very distinct role playing that role, but he has good size. He has good athleticism. So I want to keep an eye on him. I wanted the Grizzlies going to play him in this game. Taylor Hendricks missed the last game. Remember, he had that fall in the first game. He played 1 minute in the second half, missed the rest of that game. And we'll see if he's going to be available. But I think this is an opportunity for some of the other guys before the Grizzlies get to Las Vegas later on, and they're going to be playing their first game out there July 10th against Chicago Bulls. It's going to be a fun one. That's supposed to be Caleb Wilson versus Cam Boozer. There's going to be a lot of eyes on that one, so I'm looking forward to kind of seeing that play out as well. But as always, appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me today. Now, for your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast where there is no offseason. Wes, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate you guys again for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. On tomorrow's episode of Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to recap some things. We're going to recap this game between the Grizzlies and the Hawks. We're going to break down some guys. Look, somebody's got to play. So there's going to be some guys we're going to break down from that situation as well. We also are going to see what happens with this Quinten Post situation and much more. So stay tuned for all that on the next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But until next time, make sure you remember that Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify. Wherever you get it, Locked On Grizzlies is there. I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.